It's a beautiful day here in the Mushroom Kingdom. The sun is shining, the birds are chirping, and Mario is... Oh, that's happening. Yep, today I'm playing through Super Mario Odyssey, but I get followed by a bunch of clones, and if any of them touch me, I die. This mod is amazing, but is also a lot more difficult than I thought it would be. Thank you to Amethyst for creating it, and of course, subscribe if you enjoy. So let's get started, and there they go already. These clones catch up to you quite fast, so you've always got to be on the move. That became clear very quickly, because stopping for a split second means that happens. So I got into my speedrunning zone so I could fly over the bridge and up Top Hat Tower super quickly. Things really got put into perspective at this point, because this challenge also turned into bonking or taking damage means death. Imagine having trouble getting through this. And then there was Topper. Usually he's a complete non-factor in these stories, but things are much different here. Boss fights are the worst for this challenge because there's not exactly room to run away from the clones. This arena specifically is also quite small, so the only strat really is to lead them in a circle around the outside, but trying to hit and jump on Topper while keeping up with this motion is ridiculous. I died way too many times here, some for stupid reasons like this, and another time I beat the boss, the wire spawned, but one of the clones still killed me before I could jump in. Apparently, if this happens, trying to re-enter the arena crashes the game. Not only that, but reloading doesn't actually put you before the boss since the game already saved. So now this file is permanently unbeatable. Where was this method for softlock %? So here we go again, starting a new one and getting back up here. Now that I had all the patterns down, it wasn't that bad. This time, I didn't mess it up at the end and finally went to Cascade. Now that we're here, let's see what we can get. Well, I opened the first moon and died just after, but it's okay because the moon is still available, so we actually got something. Then I did Dino Skip up to the arena, but was having a little bit of trouble on the boss once again. I kept dying and getting respawned back to here. I didn't want to have to deal with that. That just seemed a little annoying. So I thought it would be more worth it to get a near frame-perfect jump off this rock, leap all the way up to the bones, and dive over to grab the checkpoint. That helped a good bit, because with shorter trips now, I was able to figure out the boss after that. It seems that captures are safe from the clones, but diving away after uncapturing is the hard part. After a bit, I got it down though, and it was way easier now since there was a ton of space this time. After grabbing that moon, we were off to sand. Thankfully, there's a lot more freedom here, but you still gotta be fast. It almost felt like the routine was grab a moon, die, go for a different one, rinse and repeat. But I learned something interesting here. One, sub-areas appear to spawn in a seemingly infinite number of clones, and two, I was originally nervous about ground pound moons since you have to stop to perform that motion, but apparently if a clone just touches the ground pound spot, the moon appears. It was much easier to just do that, make a U-turn, then grab it. This even worked with the cactus, surprisingly enough. Even if there were some moons that just weren't going to be possible, I managed to grab just enough to move on. Then we were in Lake. One issue here was the zipper. After my first attempt opening it led to this, I knew I needed a different method. I came up with this. Looks a little strange, but it got the job done and just barely left me enough room to slip inside. The rest of the moons were a breeze because of the Cheep Cheep, and then we had another Broodal. The quick kill obviously was not happening because ground pound and staying in one spot, so I did this. The double jump was thankfully high enough to reach this tall boy, and then I just made all the clones run in a circle again. Patience is definitely important for these, but this method worked perfectly, as long as a clone isn't right in the front when I finish. Let's just go to Wooded. Bunny and Rock were no problem, and despite the constant dying so far, I actually had enough coins for the shop moon as well. Then comes the issue of breaking the nuts. spots. Sometimes I was able to make a circle to break it open. It worked well for the first two, but for some others, I just couldn't be bothered. Even though I missed some moons from that, I got Flower Road skip near perfectly, so that felt good. Thanks to the uproot, I got both moons in the tower, and at the top, found out that Spewer was in fact the easiest Broodal to defeat, since he is pretty much always right in the middle, and probably also due to the fact there's only 3 clones here because this kingdom is so freaking massive. Anyway, there was that multi-moon, and then I tried Flooding Pipeway, which I thought would be dang near impossible to complete, but with super precise and quick moves, I actually managed to get both the moons in here. After that, I just needed 3 more and found just enough easy ones lying around. Great, now we can leave. Okay, now we can leave. So, now the Cloud Kingdom Bowser battle. Nothing could ever go wrong here, right? Everything should just be completely normal. Yeah, is anyone surprised? Thankfully, the clones so graciously stay still while punching Bowser, but after the hit is made, they jump towards you pretty quickly. After we got past that first incident, this was not bad at all. The fact there was only 1 tailspin helped, but it might be harder later on with more of those. For now, though, in Lost, things got much better, though I did mess up Meme Tree more times than I'd like to admit. Not because of the clones, just because I'm bad. But once I finally got up, things went really smooth somehow. I got the butterfly moon like this first try. That doesn't even happen when playing normally most of the time. Also, I felt like I was getting really good at this ground pound U-turn thing. Klepto was activated and I got 8 moons with no trouble. The only one that was even slightly challenging was the stone cage, just because rolling fast enough out of the way here was a little rough. But I got the moon in there and the one under the bridge, so we were done. I would like to say that me playing really well continued into Metro, and it almost did. I got to the top of the buildings with great speed, missed the Goomba bounce, but somehow still survived, and had perfect movement inside New Donk City Hall, except for when I had to jump off the pole. The direction was not right, and I got all thrown off, as clearly shown here. But miraculously, I recovered just enough to dive over, only to bonk on the chest and die anyway. Wow. And you know how when you're playing video games and you almost beat something first try and then can never get close after that? Yeah, that's how it went here. These clones are relentless. After a lot more tries, I finally made it back up and could fight Mecha Wiggler. Thankfully, you don't instant die in captures, but these clones were still tough. Honestly, it may have been even more intimidating with them slowly sliding around like this. But as long as you keep moving, even when you have to stop to shoot, you should be alright. Now it was Day Metro, and there would be a lot of moons here that would be very easy. But I was kind of in the mood for the festival. This would help too, because clones can't keep chasing you when you talk to people. The sewer was entered, the power was activated, and yep, the 2D clones exist. I'm used to doing all of this pretty fast though, so they shouldn't catch up. The only concerning part was the very end with Donkey Kong, since you have to hit the blocks and then run back out to get up to the pipe. It was close, but I just barely made it. That was relieving to finish up, and once again, we're off. Then snow was even more difficult. Look at this. Sadly, I don't think we're doing Snowdram today. Oh, and also... nice entrance. Not only did that happen, but getting the 3 moons in here was a pain. It took way too many tries to get the one at the start. Honestly, don't even know how this worked. Then after that, I had to do another wall jump from the bridge. That wasn't that bad, but Cappy not opening the chest in time was. And finally, this moon. It was just a simple ground pound spot, but because of the number of clones in this small area, I basically had to do a full lap around the entire entire room. It took a lot of work, but we did it. And everything else in the splitting paths was fine. The poison room was free, same for the Goomba room, minus the fact that this clone killed one of the ones I needed. And then the shards room, which was a little annoying because the bite frosts were a little slow going up. But after you get up one, you can get all the way to the top in no time. Okay, let's get out of here and go to Seaside. I knew this kingdom should be a bit simpler, and it was. Outside of this jump at the beginning, which was way too precise. But of course, capturing the Cheep Cheep makes the rest of the moon super easy. However, Fish Clip is kind of a problem since uncapturing is required for it. So I decided to go back in time and relive the days of the old Seaside route, running across the water to grab the notes and swimming into this hole the old-fashioned way. Man, those were the days. So what's up with Luncheon? Well, I was not going to be bothered with this jump up to the salt pile. Instead, I jumped up to this roof and went all the way back around. But other than that, everything here was pretty basic. Spewer was easy once again. Getting both moons in here was cool. Breaking this box was a little awkward, but still possible. Then it came time to jump out to these platforms and do the fork sub-area. You know, I thought it would be a lot harder, but apparently you can flick so fast that it's no issue at all. However, an issue does arise once we leave the area and go up to the next section. Atop the Jutting Crag was not going so great since this is a pretty high jump, so I decided to skip it and jump straight to the Pan Bros, which should have been easier than it was getting up there. But after finally making it, I could get a few more moons from the next area and then climb on up to capture the meat. But this capture apparently does not work the same way. You still die if the clone catches up to your spot here. It looked like it might be over, but then I had an idea. All I had to do was capture, shift over a bit, uncapture, and then lead all the clones back around like this. It was kind of a shadow clone dance. This would repeat over and over again until the meat was all the way to the left, and we could jump to get the attention of Kukateel. Was this incredibly tedious? Yes. Was it satisfying? Yes, totally worth it. The end was in sight, but I knew I had a challenge coming up. That, of course, was going to Ruin and fighting the dragon. On the arena, there is plenty of space to move around and separate yourself from the clones, but the problem is you can't take any damage from all the electricity attacks. Jumping over all of these isn't helped by the fact that the clones cause a good amount of lag here. Yeah, that's not your internet, that's the game. Also, you can't stand around when pulling up all the chains, obviously. I struggled a good amount with this, not because it was really hard, but because one tiny mistake and you start all over. And that is why this moment was very painful. See, after ground pounding, I thought the clones would just stop, like on the first two hits, but no. Apparently, we gotta keep playing for another second and roll out of the way. I was then way too careful when grabbing that multi-moon. So, one late game challenge had been cleared, and now there was Bowser's Kingdom. This is where yet another challenge for us to complete awaits. But before we get to that, let's look at the first few story moons. Ground pounding the ogre was pretty ridiculous. Basically, you had to stop for a brief moment so he'd attack, get a high jump up to him, then get a near frame-perfect spin pound and roll away. And sometimes, even if all of that is done, it's still not good enough. So many things happen in fractions of a second for this to work. At least getting all of the shards and the moon on the roof had no complications, and it was kind of the same way for the Broodals. There was a rematch with the nearly impossible topper from before, but this time, he was easy. How does that work? Well, it was probably because even if you die right after he's defeated, you don't have to start over. The statue just stays destroyed. The Harriet fight also wasn't so bad. Slightly annoying though, because the clone clones made it so you couldn't turn around and hit back the blue bombs. It was possible, but definitely too risky to go for. If you can once again play the patience game and wait for all the purple bombs to come in, you should get 3 easy hits. After that, climbing the wall was a piece of cake with the Pokio making fast work of it. And here's that challenge I mentioned, Mecha Broodal. So how do you do this? Climbing up on the legs like usual does not seem to be an option this time. So it appears the strat is capture a bird so that we can bring the boss down the usual way, then uncapture once we're up to ground pound fast and get a hit, then take advantage of the getting launched away as to barely avoid the clones. Once again, this seems easy when just looking at that, but there's the pressure throughout the whole thing. Remember, you can't get hit by anything. If you get hit by a bomb, the mech runs into you, or if you touch these flaming wheels, you start all over, because those clones are right there and ready to strike. Getting all 4 hits in a row was very nerve-wracking, but I'm glad to say I got through it. That's it for the collectible moons, so away to the actual moon. All we gotta do now is take on one final fight with the clones circling right behind us. Moon Cave skip was, of course, a little more complicated, but still very possible. Then inside the wedding hall we go, and it's time to take on Bowser. Similar to the Cloud fight, the clones stop moving while you're punching him, and you know how I said it might get harder here with more tail spins? Well, I was right. After you get the first set of punches in, the clones start moving for a little bit, so you have to move around Bowser as you're jumping over his tail. Then after you punch him again, there's the jump roping fire thing while constantly moving in a circle. The first 2 phases of this fight aren't that bad, but the last punching sequence gets intense. Having to punch once, jump over 3 tail swipes, punch again, and jump over 1 more. One time I was sure I had it, but for some reason I jumped way too close to Bowser and took a hit. There's just so many factors here. The camera gets a little weird, you might not see where you're going, and you could just miss when throwing Cappy. But like I always say, persistence pays off. And finally, I got that perfect phase 3. Bowser was done. Now we could drop below and capture him to finish this thing. And the clones were still following me, but I had become invincible. They will always be remembered, but I have finally defeated them after so long. I broke down that moon rock, escaped with the wire, and watched that amazing shadow clone line flying through the air. What a journey that was. I loved playing this mod, but it was still really, really hard. I died way too many times, but because of every challenge I had to go through to beat this thing, I then went back to home ground and found that the clones were still there, but I was gifted total invincibility from now on. There was no more worrying about death when they touched me. Not only that, but now I could bounce on their heads, and that made this possible. All I had to do was bounce on one of them, and because they all follow each other up, I could just keep going up super fast and get some of the best views for all of these kingdoms. Never seen anything like this before, but it was a great way to finish off this challenge. Check out Amethyst down below. She's an amazing modder and content creator, and that's all I got for you today. Thank you for watching.